Major Sarah Chen had been dead for 5 years. At least, that's what the official records said. The memorial plaque on the wall at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada bore her name in polished brass letters. Major Sarah Chen, 1985-2020, killed in action, a true patriot. Fresh flowers appeared beneath it every month, placed there by someone who still remembered. The young pilots walking past it barely gave it a glance anymore. To them, she was just another name from the past, another cautionary tale told during safety briefings. But on this particular Tuesday morning in March 2025, that was all about to change. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the briefing room at Nellis, half listening to the pre-flight checklist. He was the lead pilot for today's training exercise, a routine patrol over the Nevada test and training range. 4 F-22 Raptors would fly in formation, practicing tactical maneuvers. Nothing unusual, nothing dangerous. Jake was 32, confident, and considered himself one of the best pilots on base. He'd graduated top of his class at the Air Force Academy. He'd flown combat missions in 3 different countries, and he'd never once heard the story about Major Sarah Chen beyond the basics. Female pilot, lost during a classified mission, presumed dead when her plane went down over restricted territory. Women pilots, his instructor had once muttered during flight school, shaking his head. They don't have what it takes when things get rough, too emotional, too weak. Jake had never questioned it. In his mind, flying fighters was a man's job. Sure, there were a few women in the program now, but they were diversity hires, he figured. They'd never measure up to the real pilots, the men who'd been dreaming of flying since they were boys. The briefing ended, and Jake headed to the flight line with his wingmen, Captain Rodriguez, Lieutenant Hayes, and Lieutenant Collins. The morning sun blazed across the tarmac, turning the rows of fighter jets into gleaming silver birds. Jake felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as he approached his F-22. This never got old. Viper 1, ready for takeoff, Jake radioed from the cockpit 20 minutes later. Viper 2, ready, Rodriguez confirmed. Viper 3, ready, Hayes added. Viper 4, ready, Collins finished. The tower cleared them, and one by one the 4 Raptors screamed down the runway and lifted into the crystal blue Nevada sky. Jake smiled inside his oxygen mask. This was freedom. This was power. They climbed to 30,000 feet and began their exercises, banking left then right, practicing intercept patterns, running through emergency procedures. Everything was textbook perfect. Then 40 minutes into the flight, Jake felt strange. It started as a slight dizziness. He blinked hard, trying to clear his vision. The instruments in front of him seemed to blur for just a moment. He shook his head, annoyed. Maybe he hadn't eaten enough breakfast. Viper 1, you okay up there? Rodriguez asked over the radio. Your flight pattern's getting a little wobbly. I'm fine, Jake snapped, but he wasn't fine. The dizziness was getting worse. His hands felt heavy on the controls. The horizon seemed to tilt. Jake, seriously, what's going on? Hayes pressed. Jake tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. His vision tunneled. The cockpit spun around him, and then everything went black. Viper 1 is unresponsive, Rodriguez shouted into the radio. Jake, do you copy? Jake. Inside his cockpit, Jake slumped forward against his harness, completely unconscious. His F-22 began to drift, slowly losing altitude. The other 3 pilots watched in horror as their lead's plane started to descend in a lazy spiral. Tower, we have an emergency, Rodriguez radioed, his voice tight with controlled panic. Viper 1 pilot is unconscious. Repeat, pilot is unconscious. Aircraft is descending through 28,000 feet. Copy that, Viper 2. Can you get visual confirmation? Rodriguez pulled his F-22 closer to Jake's plane, his heart pounding. He could see Jake's helmeted head lolled forward, not moving, not responding. Confirmed, tower. Pilot is slumped over, unresponsive. This was every pilot's nightmare. If Jake didn't wake up soon, his plane would eventually crash into the desert below. They were over restricted territory, the same area where training accidents had happened before. The same area where Major Sarah Chen had disappeared 5 years ago. Viper 1, this is Nellis Tower, come in, the tower operator said, trying to reach Jake directly. Nothing. Hayes moved his plane to Jake's other side. What do? We can't just watch him crash. We stay with him, Rodriguez decided, and we pray he wakes up before it's too late. Jake's F-22 continued its slow descent, 25,000 feet, 22,000, 20,000. In the tower back at Nellie's, controllers scrambled. Emergency vehicles rolled onto the runway. The base commander was notified. Everyone knew they were watching a potential disaster unfold in real time. And then, cutting through all the radio chatter, all the panic, all the desperate calls, came a voice. A woman's voice. Calm, clear, steady. Viper 1, this is Ghost Rider. I have you on visual. You need to wake up, Captain, right now. Every pilot in the air froze. Rodriguez, Hayes, and Collins all stopped breathing for a moment. Ghost Rider. That was Major Sarah Chen's call sign. But Sarah Chen was dead. She'd been dead for 5 years. Who is this? Rodriguez demanded, his voice cracking. Identify yourself immediately. Focus on your lead pilot, Viper 2, the woman's voice responded. He's descending through 18,000 feet. You have about 3 minutes before this gets bad. Rodriguez looked frantically at his radar. There was nothing there, no other aircraft in the area. No one else should be on this frequency. Viper 1, the voice continued, stronger now, more urgent. Jake Morrison, you need to wake up. Your plane is going down. Fight it. Open your eyes. Inside his cockpit, Jake's unconscious mind heard the voice. It cut through the darkness like a blade. A woman's voice, commanding, unafraid. His fingers twitched. That's it, the voice encouraged. Come on, Captain, you've got this. Pull up, wake up and pull up. Jake's eyes fluttered. The blackness began to recede. He could hear alarms blaring in his cockpit now. Altitude warnings, system alerts. Jake Morrison, the voice said, and there was something fierce in it now. You do not get to die today, not on my watch. Pull up, now. Jake's eyes snapped open. His vision swam, but he could see the altimeter spinning down, 15,000 feet. His hands moved instinctively to the stick. He pulled back hard. The F-22 responded, its nose lifting. The descent slowed, then stopped. Jake leveled out at 12,000 feet, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Viper 1, do you copy? Rodriguez was almost shouting. I copy, Jake managed. I'm okay, I'm back. The relief in the other pilots' voices was palpable. They all started talking at once, asking questions, checking his status. But Jake wasn't listening to them. He was scanning his radio display, trying to figure out who had just saved his life. Ghost Rider, he said into his mic. Ghost Rider, identify yourself. Who are you? Silence. Jake checked his radar again. Nothing. He looked out his canopy in all directions, empty sky. Did anyone else hear that? He asked his wingman. Did you hear the woman on the radio? We heard her, Hayes confirmed, his voice shaky. But Jake, Ghost Rider was Major Sarah Chen's call sign, and she's been dead for 5 years. Jake's blood ran cold. His hands were still trembling on the controls. His vision was still clearing from whatever had caused him to black out. But he knew what he'd heard. A woman had talked him back from the edge. A woman who'd used a dead pilot's call sign. Tower, did you copy that transmission? Rodriguez asked. Did you hear the Ghost Rider call sign? There was a long pause from the tower. When the controller finally spoke, his voice was uncertain. Negative, Viper 2. We heard only your transmissions and Viper 1's alarms, no other voice on this channel. The 4 pilots looked at each other across the sky, though they couldn't see each other's faces behind their visors. That's impossible, Collins whispered. We all heard her. Viper formation, return to base immediately, the tower ordered. We need to debrief this incident. Jake turned his F-22 toward home, his mind racing. He'd been unconscious, he'd nearly died, and a ghost had saved him. As they flew back toward Nellie's, Jake couldn't shake the memory of that voice. Strong, confident, completely unafraid, everything his instructors had told him women pilots couldn't be. He glanced down at the desert passing beneath him, the same desert where Sarah Chen had supposedly died, the same restricted territory that held so many secrets. And for the first time in his career, Captain Jake Morrison wondered if everything he'd been told about women in combat, about courage, about strength, might have been a lie. The debriefing room at Nellie's Air Force Base felt like a pressure cooker. Jake sat at the long conference table, still in his flight suit, with Rodriguez, Hayes, and Collins on either side of him. Across from them sat Colonel Marcus Webb, the base commander, along with 2 intelligence officers whose names Jake didn't catch and didn't care about. Let's go through this one more time, Colonel Webb said, his fingers steepled in front of him. He was 55, gray-haired, and had the hard eyes of a man who'd seen real combat. You blacked out at 30,000 feet. Yes, sir, Jake confirmed. His head still ached from whatever had happened up there. And you don't remember anything until you woke up at 15,000 feet. That's correct, sir, except, Jake hesitated. Except what, Captain? I heard a voice, a woman's voice. She was telling me to wake up, to pull up. She called herself Ghost Rider. Colonel Webb's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. The two intelligence officers exchanged a glance. We've reviewed the radio logs, one of the intelligence officers said. She was a major, thin, and sharp-featured. There's no record of any transmission using that call sign. But we all heard her, Rodriguez insisted, leaning forward. All four of us. She was on our frequency, clear as day. What exactly did she say? The male intelligence officer asked. Hayes pulled out a small notebook where he'd written down everything he could remember. She said, Viper 1, this is Ghost Rider, I have you on visual. Then she told Rodriguez to focus on Jake. She said we had about 3 minutes. And then she talked directly to Jake, used his full name, and ordered him to wake up. How did she know my name? Jake asked, the question that had been bothering him since they'd landed. How did she know who I was? No one had an answer for that. Colonel Webb stood and walked to the window overlooking the flight line. He was quiet for a long moment, his back to the room. Ghost Rider was the call sign of Major Sarah Chen, he finally said. She disappeared 5 years ago during a classified test flight over the Nevada test and training range. Her plane went down in restricted territory. We searched for 2 weeks but never found her body or the wreckage. She was declared KIA. What was she testing? Jake asked. That's still classified, the female intelligence officer cut in, even from you. Jake felt a flash of anger. A ghost just saved my life using her call sign, and you're going to tell me it's classified. Captain Morrison, Colonel Webb turned around, his voice hard. You need to understand something. Major Chen's mission was beyond top secret, the technology she was testing. If it fell into the wrong hands, it would change the balance of power in the world. That's all you need to know. But if she's alive, Rodriguez started. She's not alive, Webb interrupted. She can't be. No one could have survived out there for 5 years. It's impossible. Then how do you explain what happened today? Hayes demanded. Webb looked at the 4 pilots, and for the first time, Jake saw uncertainty in the colonel's eyes. I can't, Webb admitted quietly, but I'm going to find out. The debriefing lasted another hour. They went over every detail, every word, every moment of the incident. The intelligence officers took notes, asked the same questions in different ways, and revealed nothing. Finally, they were dismissed. Jake walked out into the Nevada afternoon, exhausted and confused. His wingmen caught up with him in the parking lot. This is crazy, Collins said, shaking his head. Ghosts don't fly planes, ghosts don't talk on radios. Then what happened up there? Rodriguez asked. They all looked at Jake. He was the one she'd spoken to most directly. He was the one she'd saved. I don't know, Jake said, but I'm going to find out who she really was, who Sarah Chen was. That evening, Jake sat in his small base apartment with his laptop, searching for information about Major Sarah Chen. There wasn't much. A few official Air Force photos from ceremony. A brief biography, born in San Francisco, graduated from the Air Force Academy with honors, trained as a test pilot, served with distinction. The article mentioned she was one of the few women qualified to fly the F-22 Raptor. There was a memorial service video from 5 years ago. Jake clicked on it, feeling strange about watching a dead woman's funeral. The video showed a hangar at Nellie's filled with uniformed personnel. A chaplain spoke. Fellow pilots gave eulogies, and then an older woman stepped to the podium, Sarah Chen's mother. My daughter, she said, her voice breaking, was told her entire career that she didn't belong. That women couldn't handle the stress of flying fighters, that she was too emotional, too weak, too small. She proved them all wrong. Jake felt something twist in his chest. He thought about all the times he'd dismissed female pilots, all the jokes he'd laughed at, all the assumptions he'd made. Sarah's mother continued. The night before her last flight, Sarah called me. She said she was scared. Not of dying. Sarah was never afraid of that. She was scared that if something went wrong, people would use it as proof that women don't belong in the cockpit. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would tell everyone that she died doing what she loved, doing her duty. The older woman wiped her eyes. My daughter was braver than anyone I've ever known, and I will never stop believing that somewhere out there she's still flying. The video ended. Jake sat in the darkness of his apartment, staring at the frozen image of Sarah Chen in her flight suit, smiling confidently at the camera. He pulled up the incident report from her disappearance. It had been declassified partially, with huge sections redacted in black. But he could piece together the basics. She'd been testing some kind of new avionics system. The test flight was scheduled to last 6 hours. She'd been in radio contact for the first 3 hours, then suddenly went silent. Her plane disappeared from radar over the most restricted section of the Nevada test and training range, an area nicknamed the Box, where even military pilots weren't allowed without special clearance. Search and rescue had been launched immediately, but they'd found nothing. No wreckage, no emergency beacon, no parachute. It was as if she'd simply vanished into thin air. Jake was so absorbed in his research that he didn't hear the knock on his door at first. When it came again, louder, he jumped. He opened the door to find Colonel Webb standing there, out of uniform, wearing jeans and a civilian jacket. "Sir," Jake said, surprised. "Can I come in, Captain?" Jake stepped aside. Webb entered and closed the door behind him. He looked around the small apartment, noticed the laptop still showing Sarah Chen's photo. "I figured you'd go looking," Webb said. "I would have done the same thing." "Sir, I don't understand any of this." Webb sat down heavily on Jake's couch. He suddenly looked much older than his 55 years. "Sarah Chen was the best pilot I've ever known," Webb said quietly. "And I've known a lot of pilots. She could fly anything. She could think 3 steps ahead of everyone else, and she never, ever gave up." "You knew her personally?" "I was her commanding officer. I sent her on that last mission." Webb's hands clenched into fists. "I've regretted it every day since." "What was she testing? You can tell me. After what happened today, I deserve to know." Webb was quiet for a long moment. Then he seemed to make a decision. "She was testing a new AI-assisted flight system, something that would allow a pilot to interface directly with the aircraft's computer, almost like the plane became an extension of the pilot's thoughts. It was supposed to revolutionize air combat." He paused. "But there were problems. The system was unstable. It caused hallucinations, blackouts, disorientation. Sarah knew the risks. She volunteered anyway." Jake's blood ran cold. "Blackouts like what happened to me today." Webb looked at him sharply. "We need to run some tests on you tomorrow, full medical workup, because if what happened to you is related to what happened to Sarah..." He didn't finish the sentence. "You think she's alive, don't you?" Jake said. "I think," Webb said carefully, "that there are things in that desert we don't understand. And I think Sarah Chen was involved with technology that might have done something to her we can't explain." He stood up. "Get some rest, Captain. Tomorrow we're going to start looking for answers." After Webb left, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept hearing that voice in his head, strong, clear, unafraid. "You do not get to die today, not on my watch." Somewhere out in the Nevada desert, under the stars, something was happening that defied explanation. And Jake Morrison, who had spent his entire career believing he knew what it took to be a real pilot, was beginning to realize he didn't know anything at all. The sun was just rising over the desert when Jake reported to the medical center at Nellie's. He'd barely slept, his mind spinning with questions that had no answers. Inside the sterile white examination room, a team of doctors and technicians waited for him. "Captain Morrison," the lead physician said, a woman in her 40s with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. "I'm Dr. Patricia Lindstrom. We're going to run some tests to figure out what caused your episode yesterday." For the next 3 hours, Jake was poked, prodded, scanned, and questioned. Blood tests, brain scans, heart monitors, they checked everything. Finally, Dr. Lindstrom came back with a tablet full of results. "Your blood work shows elevated levels of several unusual compounds," she said, frowning at the screen. "Nothing toxic, but definitely abnormal. And your brain scan shows some unusual activity in your temporal lobe, the area associated with perception and awareness." "What does that mean?" Jake asked. Dr. Lindstrom hesitated. "Honestly, I'm not sure. I've never seen readings quite like this." She looked at him carefully. "Captain, did you experience any unusual sensory phenomena before you blacked out? Strange sounds, visual distortions?" Jake thought back. Everything seemed normal until the dizziness hit. But, he paused. When I was unconscious, when I heard that voice, it felt different than a regular radio transmission. It felt like it was inside my head. Dr. Lindstrom and one of the technicians exchanged meaningful glances. "What?" Jake demanded. "What is it?" "Captain Morrison," Dr. Lindstrom said slowly. "I need you to come with me. There's someone you need to meet." She led him through a series of corridors deep into the base, past security checkpoints Jake had never been through before. They descended 2 levels underground and entered a secure wing marked Research Division Authorized Personnel Only. In a small conference room, 2 people waited. One was Colonel Webb. The other was a man in his 60s wearing a rumpled suit and thick glasses. He looked like a professor who'd forgotten to comb his hair. "Captain Morrison, this is Dr. Raymond Foster," Webb said. He was the lead scientist on Project Ghost Rider, the program Sarah Chen was testing. Jake shook the scientist's hand. Dr. Foster's grip was weak, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. "Sit down, son," Dr. Foster said. "What I'm about to tell you will sound like science fiction, but I assure you it's all too real." Jake sat, his heart was pounding. Dr. Foster pulled up a holographic display from a projector on the table. It showed a schematic of what looked like a fighter plane's cockpit, but with strange additions: neural interfaces, quantum processors, things Jake didn't recognize. "5 years ago," Dr. Foster began, "we were developing a system that would create a direct neural link between a pilot and their aircraft. Not just fly-by-wire, but fly-by-thought. The pilot's consciousness would merge with the plane's computer, creating a hybrid intelligence capable of reaction times and spatial awareness far beyond human limits." "That's impossible," Jake said. "That's what everyone said," Dr. Foster replied with a sad smile. "Until Sarah Chen proved it wasn't. She was our best test pilot. She had the right combination of skill, intelligence, and mental discipline to interface with the system. The early tests were miraculous. She could execute maneuvers that would kill a normal pilot. She could process information from multiple sensors simultaneously. She became, in effect, one with her aircraft." "So what went wrong?" Jake asked. Dr. Foster's expression darkened. "We didn't account for the quantum entanglement. The neural interface didn't just connect Sarah to her plane, it connected her consciousness to the quantum field itself. When her plane went down, we thought she died. But now," he looked at Colonel Webb, "now I think something else happened." "You think her consciousness survived?" Jake said slowly. "Somehow in the system." "More than that," Dr. Foster said. "I think she became part of the electromagnetic field that covers this entire testing range. The system had quantum processors that were designed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. If Sarah's consciousness was fully integrated with those processors at the moment of the crash." He trailed off. "You're saying she's a ghost in the machine?" Jake said. "Literally." "I'm saying her consciousness may have dispersed into the quantum substrate of the testing range's sensor network," Dr. Foster corrected. "She's not dead, but she's not alive in any way we understand. She's somewhere in between." Jake felt dizzy again. This was insane, but it was the only explanation that made sense. "Why did she contact me?" he asked. "Why yesterday?" "That's what we need to figure out," Colonel Webb said. "But Captain, there's something else you need to know. Your blackout, Dr. Lindstrom found traces of the same quantum markers in your blood that Sarah had in hers. You were exposed to something up there." Jake stood up abruptly. "Are you telling me I'm infected with this, whatever it is?" "Not infected," Dr. Foster said quickly, "but you may have been touched by it. Sarah's consciousness reached out to you, and in doing so, she may have created a bridge between your mind and the quantum field." "This is crazy," Jake said, packing the small room. "This is absolutely crazy." "I know how it sounds," Webb said. "But think about it, Captain. She knew your name. She knew exactly where you were. She guided you back from unconsciousness. How could a simple radio transmission do that?" Jake stopped packing. He remembered the feeling of that voice in his head, not in his ears, in his head, like a thought that wasn't his own. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "We want you to go back up," Dr. Foster said. "Back to the area where this happened. Sarah reached out to you once. Maybe she'll do it again. Maybe we can finally bring her home." "And if she reaches out again, what happens to me?" Jake demanded. "Do I end up like her, scattered across the desert in bits of quantum whatever?" "We'll take every precaution," Dr. Foster promised. We've learned a lot in 5 years. We know more about the risks now. That's not very reassuring, Jake muttered. Colonel Webb stood and faced Jake directly. Captain Morrison, Sarah Chen saved your life yesterday. She's been out there for 5 years, alone, probably in agony, trapped in a state we can't even imagine. If there's any chance at all, that we can help her, don't we owe her that? Jake thought about the memorial plaque in the hallway, about Sarah's mother saying her daughter was braver than anyone she'd ever known, about the voice that had pulled him back from the edge. You do not get to die today, not on my watch. When do we go? Jake asked. Relief washed over Webb's face. Tomorrow morning, we'll have a full support team. Dr. Foster will be monitoring from the ground. And Jake, thank you. That night, Jake returned to his apartment and opened his laptop again. He pulled up every article, every video, every scrap of information he could find about Sarah Chen. He needed to know who she really was, not the ghost, not the quantum consciousness, the woman. He found an interview she'd done with a military magazine 3 years before her disappearance. The interviewer had asked her what it felt like to be a woman in a male-dominated field. Sarah's answer had been characteristically direct. I don't think about it much. I'm not here to prove anything about my gender. I'm here to fly. I'm here to serve my country. And I'm here to push the boundaries of what's possible. If that inspires other women to follow their dreams, great. But I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this because I love it. The interviewer had pressed. But surely you've faced discrimination, harassment, doubt about your abilities. Sarah had smiled. Jake could see it in the video, that confident smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Every single day, she'd admitted. But here's the thing people don't understand. Their doubt is their problem, not mine. I know what I can do. I know my capabilities. And when I'm in that cockpit, none of their opinions matter. It's just me, the plane, and the sky. That's the only truth that counts. Jake closed the laptop. He thought about all the times he'd doubted women pilots, all the times he'd assumed they couldn't measure up, all the casual sexism he'd participated in without even thinking about it. Sarah Chen had been better than him, better than probably anyone currently flying at Nellie's, and she'd known it despite everyone trying to tell her otherwise. Tomorrow, he was going to try to bring her home, or at least, he was going to try to reach whatever was left of her. He owed her that much. And maybe, just maybe, he owed it to himself to learn what real courage looked like. Jake stood on the flight line at 600 hours, watching the sun paint the desert gold. His F-22 was fueled and ready, but this time it was different. This time, Dr. Foster's team had installed special monitoring equipment in the cockpit, sensors that would track his neural activity, his brain waves, even his quantum biofield, whatever that meant. Colonel Webb approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Jake. How are you feeling? Webb asked. Like I'm about to fly into the twilight zone, Jake said honestly. Webb chuckled, but there was no humor in it. I felt the same way the day Sarah took off on her last flight. I should have stopped her. The tests had been showing anomalies, but she was so determined, so confident that she could handle it. It wasn't your fault, Jake said. Wasn't it? Webb stared out at the desert. I was her commander. Her safety was my responsibility, and I let her go because she was the best, and I needed the best for this mission. I put the mission ahead of her life. She volunteered, didn't she? She did, but that doesn't make it easier. Webb turned to Jake. Don't let her sacrifice be for nothing, Captain. If she's out there, if any part of her is still conscious and aware, bring her home. Jake nodded. He climbed into his cockpit, and the ground crew helped him strap in. Today he was flying alone, no wingmen, no distractions. Just him and whatever he might find in the sky. Ghost Rider 2, you are clear for takeoff, the tower radioed. Ghost Rider 2. They'd given him Sarah's call sign for this mission. It felt both an honor and a burden. Jake pushed the throttles forward, and the Raptor roared down the runway and lifted into the morning sky. He climbed to 30,000 feet and turned toward the box, the restricted area where Sarah had disappeared. Ghost Rider 2 entering restricted airspace, Jake radioed. Copy that, Dr. Foster's voice came through. All monitoring equipment is active. Neural sensors are reading normal. How do you feel? Solid, Jake replied. No dizziness, no disorientation. Good, proceed to Waypoint Alpha. That's where Sarah's plane dropped off radar 5 years ago. Jake banked toward the coordinates. Below him, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly, ridges and valleys, dry lake beds and ancient mountain ranges. It looked desolate, lifeless. But Jake knew better now. Something was down there, or all around him, or everywhere at once. He reached the waypoint and began flying a search pattern, just as they'd planned. "Sarah," he said into his radio, feeling foolish. "Sarah Chen, this is Captain Jake Morrison. Call sign Ghost Rider 2. I'm here to help you. If you can hear me, if you're out there, please respond." Silence, just the hum of the engines and the whisper of wind over the canopy. Jake continued the pattern, waiting, watching. Minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. "Nothing." "Dr. Foster," Jake radioed. "I'm not getting anything. Maybe she's not here. Maybe yesterday was a one-time thing." "Give it more time," Dr. Foster urged. "The quantum field might need to stabilize. She might need to gather enough energy to manifest." Jake didn't understand half of what Dr. Foster was saying, but he kept flying. He thought about Sarah, about what it must be like to be scattered across the desert, aware but unable to act, watching the world continue without you. "I'm sorry," he said quietly into his radio, not even sure who he was talking to. "I'm sorry for not understanding. I'm sorry for thinking you weren't good enough. I'm sorry for every stupid thing I ever thought about women pilots." And then, so quietly he almost missed it, a voice. "Took you long enough to figure it out." Jake's heart jumped. Sarah Chen, is that you?" "What's left of me," the voice said. It sounded tired, so tired. "I heard you yesterday. I felt you dying. I couldn't let another pilot die in my airspace." "Where are you?" Jake asked, scanning the empty sky. "Everywhere, nowhere, spread thin across the quantum field. It's hard to explain, hard to think. I can feel myself fatting more every day." Dr. Foster's voice cut in, excited. "Major Chen, this is Dr. Foster. We're reading your quantum signature. It's weak, but we can track it. We want to help you. We want to bring you home." There was a long pause. When Sarah's voice came back, it sounded sad. "There's no home for me anymore, Doctor. This is what I am now. This is all I'll ever be." "That's not true," Jake said urgently. "Dr. Foster thinks we can reconstruct your consciousness, download it into a new substrate, give you a body again." Sarah laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "A body. I barely remember what that felt like, having weight, having limits. I'm free here, Jake, free in ways you can't imagine, but I'm also alone, so terribly alone." "Then let us help you," Jake pleaded. "Let us at least try." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Why do you care? You didn't care about me when I was alive. None of you did. I was just the diversity hire, the woman trying to play soldier, the one you all expected to fail." The words stung because they were true. Jake had thought exactly those things. "You're right," he admitted. "I did think that, and I was wrong. You were a better pilot than I'll ever be. You're braver than anyone I've ever met. And you deserve better than to fade away out here, forgotten." "I'm not forgotten," Sarah said softly. "My mother puts flowers on my memorial every month. She hasn't missed once in 5 years. I watch her. I can feel her grief. It's the only thing that keeps me tethered to this world." Jake felt tears sting his eyes. He blinked them away angrily. "Your mother thinks you're dead," he said. "But you're not. You're right here. Let us bring you back to her. Let her see you one more time. You owe her that." The silence stretched so long Jake thought Sarah had gone away. Then, "There might be a way, but it's dangerous, and you'd have to trust me completely." "Tell me," Jake said. "The quantum processors from my plane are still intact," Sarah explained. "I can feel them buried in the desert at the crash site. If you could retrieve them, Dr. Foster might be able to use them as an anchor point, a way to gather my consciousness back into a single location. But the crash site is deep in the box, past the regular restricted zones, and the only way to guide you there is if I link with your plane's systems, with you." "Link, like what you were doing with the original system?" "Yes, I'd have to interface with your neural patterns. It's intimate. You'd feel me in your mind, and I'd feel everything in yours, every thought, every memory, every secret." Jake thought about that. The idea of someone, something, inside his mind was terrifying. But what scared him more was the thought of leaving Sarah out here to fade into nothing. "Do it," he said. "Jake, wait," Dr. Foster cut in. "We don't know what that kind of interface could do to you. The risks." "I don't care about the risks," Jake interrupted. "Sarah took risks for her country, for her mission, for science. The least I can do is risk a little discomfort to help her." "It's more than discomfort," Sarah warned. "It could damage your mind permanently. You could end up like me." "Then I end up like you," Jake said simply. Better that than living the rest of my life knowing I was too scared to help someone who needed me. He could feel Sarah's surprise through the radio, through the quantum field, through whatever impossible connection existed between them. "You've changed," she observed. "You changed me," Jake replied. "Yesterday when you saved my life, today by showing me what real courage looks like. Now let me help you, please." Another pause, then Sarah's voice stronger now. "All right, Captain Morrison, link initiated. This is going to feel very strange." At first, Jake felt nothing. Then a tingling at the base of his skull. Then a rush of sensations, colors he'd never seen, sounds beyond human hearing, awareness expanding in impossible directions. And beneath it all, a presence. Sarah. He could feel her now, her loneliness, her determination, her fading hope, but also her strength. God, such strength. 5 years alone in the quantum dark and she hadn't given up. She was still fighting. "I see you," Jake whispered. "And I see you," Sarah replied. Her voice was inside him now, part of him. "Hold on, this is going to be a wild ride." And with that, Jake's F-22 banked hard to the right, guided by hands that were both his and not his, heading deeper into the desert toward a secret that had been buried for 5 long years. The F-22 dove toward the desert floor, Jake and Sarah's consciousness intertwined in ways he'd never imagined possible. He could feel her guiding the plane, could sense her relief at being connected to something physical again, even if it was through him. There, Sarah's voice echoed in his mind. 3 miles northeast, you see that canyon. Jake did see it, a narrow slash in the desert floor that wouldn't show up on most maps. His hands moved on the controls, but he wasn't entirely sure if he was the one moving them. "This is incredible," he breathed. "Is this what you felt during your test flights?" "Every time," Sarah said, and he could feel her bittersweet nostalgia. "Being one with the aircraft, it's like the plane became part of my body. Nothing in the world felt more right." They flew lower, skimming just 100 feet above the canyon floor. Jake's training screamed at him that this was dangerous, but Sarah's instincts, melded with his, knew exactly how to navigate the tight spaces. "Captain Morrison, your altitude is dangerously low," Dr. Foster's voice crackled through the radio. "Pull up immediately." "Trust me, Doctor," Jake said. "We know what we're doing." "We," Dr. Foster caught the word. "She's with you, you're linked." "Completely," Jake confirmed, and it was true. He could feel Sarah's presence in every corner of his mind. He knew things about her now, her childhood in San Francisco, her first flight in her father's Cessna at age 8, the night she learned she'd been accepted to the Air Force Academy. And she knew him too, all his insecurities, his prejudices, his fears. "I'm sorry," he told her silently, "for being such an ass." He felt her amusement. "You weren't any worse than most of them, at least you're trying to learn." The canyon opened into a wide basin, and there, half buried in sand and scrub brush, was the wreckage of an F-22 Raptor. Jake's breath caught. It wasn't completely destroyed. The crash had been more of a forced landing than an explosion. The tail section was mostly intact, and the cockpit, though damaged, was still recognizable. "My God," Jake whispered, "you survived the crash." "For a while," Sarah said, and he felt the memory wash over him, his memory now too. The terror of the system failing, the plane spiraling out of control, the desperate fight to bring it down safely. And then the crash, the impact, pain, darkness. "I was alive for 3 days," Sarah's voice was quiet. "Trapped in the cockpit, both legs broken, internal injuries. The emergency beacon was damaged. No one could hear me calling for help." Jake felt tears on his face. "Sarah." "I knew I was dying," she continued. "But the quantum system was still active, still connected to my neural patterns. In my delirium, in my desperation, I did something stupid. I tried to upload myself into the system. I thought maybe, somehow, I could preserve my consciousness long enough for rescue to arrive." "You succeeded," Jake said. "I did and I didn't," Sarah replied. "My body died, but my mind, scattered, spread across the quantum processors, across the electromagnetic field of the entire testing range. I was aware, but I couldn't think clearly, couldn't act. Just existed, watching, feeling, unable to do anything. Until yesterday." "Until yesterday," Sarah agreed. "When you started to black out, when I felt your consciousness fading, something clicked. I found focus, purpose. I couldn't save myself 5 years ago, but I could save you." Jake landed the F-22 on a flat stretch of desert near the wreckage. It was technically an insane thing to do, landing a stealth fighter in the middle of nowhere. But Sarah guided him perfectly. "Dr. Foster," Jake radioed. "We found it, the crash site, sending you coordinates now." "Copy that," Dr. Foster said. "We're scrambling a recovery team, ETA 40 minutes. Jake climbed out of the cockpit, his boots hitting the hard desert floor. With Sarah still linked to him, he walked toward the wreckage. Up close, it was even more haunting. He could see where she'd tried to force the canopy open, claw marks in the metal from her gloved hands. "The quantum processors are in the nose section," Sarah guided him, "behind the main sensor array." Jake climbed carefully onto the wreckage. The desert sun beat down mercilessly. How had Sarah survived out here for 3 days? The temperature alone should have killed her. He found the panel Sarah indicated and pried it open. Inside, beneath layers of damaged electronics, he found them. 3 silver cylinders, each about the size of a soda can, covered in strange markings and still faintly glowing with blue light. "These?" he asked. "Those," Sarah confirmed. "They're still active, still holding pieces of me. If Dr. Foster can interface them properly, he might be able to coalesce my consciousness back into something more stable." Jake carefully removed the processors and carried them back to his plane. As he did, he noticed something else, Sarah's helmet lying in the sand near the wreckage. He picked it up. Her name was still stenciled on the side. "I want this too," he said. "You're coming home, Sarah, all of you." The recovery team arrived in a convoy of vehicles 40 minutes later. Dr. Foster practically ran across the desert toward Jake. "You found them?" the scientist exclaimed, taking the quantum processors with trembling hands. "These are remarkable, still functioning after 5 years in the desert. Major Chen, wherever you are, you built something incredible." "She's here," Jake said. "Linked with me, she can hear you." Dr. Foster looked at Jake with wonder and concern. "How do you feel? Any disorientation, pain?" "I feel fine," Jake said. "Better than fine, actually. I can think more clearly than I ever have. It's like having 2 brains working together instead of one." "That's the quantum entanglement," Dr. Foster explained. "Your neural patterns are synchronized, but we need to break the link soon. Extended connection could be dangerous for both of you." "Not yet," Sarah's voice spoke through Jake's mouth, startling everyone. "I need to see something first." Dr. Foster's team spent the next 2 hours carefully excavating the crash site and loading Sarah's wreckage onto transport trucks. Jake stood watching, feeling Sarah's emotions wash through him, grief for her lost body, anger at the 5 years stolen from her, but also something else. Hope, fragile and small, but definitely hope. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple, Jake climbed back into his F-22 for the flight home. "Ready?" he asked Sarah. "Ready," she replied. The flight back to Nellie's was smooth, but as they approached the base, Jake felt Sarah's attention shift. She was looking at something below. "There," she said, "the Memorial Plaza." Jake banked slightly so he could see, and there, walking slowly along the path, was an older woman. Even from this altitude, Jake recognized her from the funeral video, Sarah's mother. "She comes every Thursday," Sarah said softly. "I've watched her for 5 years. She brings fresh flowers. She sits on the bench. She talks to my plaque like I can hear her." "You can hear her," Jake said. "Yes, but she doesn't know that. She thinks she's alone." Jake made a decision. Tower, Ghost Rider 2 requesting permission for a low pass over the Memorial Plaza. There was a pause, then Colonel Webb's voice came on. "Permission granted, Ghost Rider 2. I think someone down there needs to see you fly." Jake descended to 1,000 feet and flew directly over the Memorial Plaza. Sarah's mother looked up at the sound of the engines, shading her eyes against the setting sun. Jake rolled the F-22 in a slow barrel roll, a traditional fighter pilot's salute, and then waggled his wings twice. Through their link, Jake felt Sarah pushing, reaching out with every ounce of strength she had left. The air around the F-22 shimmered. For just a moment, just a brief instant, the quantum field became visible, a ghostly outline of another F-22 flying in formation with Jake's plane. Sarah's plane, her ghost. Sarah's mother gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She saw it. For one impossible moment, she saw her daughter flying one more time. Then the shimmer faded, and there was only Jake's plane climbing back toward the sky. "Thank you," Sarah whispered in Jake's mind. "Thank you for that." They landed at Nellie's as the last light faded from the sky. The recovery team was already there, rushing the quantum processors to Dr. Foster's lab. Jake was immediately taken to medical, where they carefully disconnected him from Sarah's consciousness. It felt like losing a part of himself. "Sarah," he called out, suddenly feeling terribly alone. "Are you still there?" No answer. Over the next 3 days, Dr. Foster and his team worked around the clock. They built a new containment system for the quantum processors, a sophisticated network that could hold and stabilize Sarah's consciousness. Jake visited the lab every day, desperate for news. On the 4th day, Dr. Foster called him in. Colonel Webb was there too, along with several officers Jake didn't know. And in the center of the lab, connected to dozens of cables and surrounded by holographic displays, sat the quantum processor array. "Is she?" Jake couldn't finish the question. "Major Sarah Chen," Dr. Foster said formally, addressing the processors. "Can you hear us?" The holographic displays flickered. Then letters formed in the air. "Loud and clear, Doctor." Jake felt his knees go weak with relief. She was still here. She'd survived. "How do you feel?" Dr. Foster asked. "Better, more focused. The PROCSSORS give me an anchor point. I can think clearly again." "Sarah, it's Jake," he said, stepping closer. "Do you remember me?" The displays changed, and suddenly Sarah's face appeared in the hologram, a digital recreation based on her photos but animated by her consciousness. "How could I forget the pilot who flies like he's trying to kill himself?" Sarah's face smiled. "Hey, Jake." He laughed, tears streaming down his face. "Hey, yourself." "We have some decisions to make," Colonel Webb said gently. "Sarah, we've briefed the Air Force leadership about your situation. You're officially no longer listed as KIA. Well, we're not entirely sure what your status is." "I'm a digital consciousness inhabiting a quantum computer," Sarah's hologram said dryly. "I'd say that makes me unique." "We want to make you an offer," Webb continued. "We're reactivating Project Ghost Rider, but with new protocols and safeguards. We want you to train the next generation of pilots, teach them about the neural interface systems. Your knowledge, your experience, it's invaluable." "And you're okay with a computer ghost training your pilots?" Sarah asked skeptically. "You're still you," Jake said firmly. "Still the best pilot any of us have ever known. Your body might have changed, but you're still Sarah Chen. You're still a major in the United States Air Force, and you still have a duty to serve if you're willing." Sarah's hologram was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'd like to see my mother first. I need to talk to her to explain." "We can arrange that," Webb said, "tomorrow." That meeting happened in a small conference room, with just Sarah's mother, Dr. Foster, Colonel Webb, and Jake present. When Sarah's hologram appeared, her mother collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "Hi, Mom," Sarah said gently. "I'm sorry I've been away so long." What followed was 3 hours of tears, explanations, and healing. Sarah's mother touched the holographic display, trying to reach her daughter. It wasn't the same as holding her. It would never be the same, but it was something. "Are you in pain?" her mother asked. "No," Sarah said. "I'm not in pain anymore. I'm just different." "You're still my daughter," her mother said fiercely. "I don't care if you're made of light and numbers. You're still my baby girl." 6 months later, Jake stood in a new briefing room at Nellie's. In front of him sat 20 young pilots, both men and women, selected for the new Ghost Rider program. And on the large screen at the front of the room, Major Sarah Chen's hologram appeared. "Good morning, pilots," Sarah said. "Welcome to the hardest training program you will ever experience. I'm Major Sarah Chen, and I'll be your primary instructor. Yes, I'm a digital consciousness. Yes, I used to be human. And yes, I'm going to push you harder than anyone has ever pushed you before." The pilots stared in awe. They'd all heard the stories by now. The pilot who'd survived death, the ghost in the machine, the legend. "Before we begin," Sarah continued, "I want to make one thing clear. This program is not about whether you're male or female. It's not about your gender, your background, or what anyone thinks you can or can't do. It's about whether you have the skill, the courage, and the determination to be the best pilot you can possibly be. That's all that matters in the cockpit. That's all that's ever mattered." She looked directly at Jake, who stood at the back of the room. He'd been promoted to major and assigned as Sarah's co-instructor. "Major Morrison," Sarah said, "would you like to add anything?" Jake stepped forward. "Just one thing," he said. If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have told you that only certain people had what it takes to fly fighters. I would have made judgments based on all kinds of stupid prejudices. But Major Chen taught me something important. Courage doesn't care about your body. Strength doesn't care about your gender. And the best pilot is the one who never gives up no matter what. He smiled at Sarah's hologram. So don't let anyone, including yourselves, tell you that you can't do this. Major Chen proved that determination can overcome even death itself. What's your excuse? The pilots laughed nervously. All right, Sarah said. Let's get to work. Jake, take them to the flight line. Time to see what they're made of. As the pilots filed out, Jake stayed behind for a moment. You okay? He asked Sarah quietly. Better than okay, Sarah replied. For the first time in 5 years, I have purpose again. I can serve. I can make a difference. And maybe, her hologram smiled, maybe I can make sure no one else has to go through what I went through. You're pretty amazing, you know that? Jake said. I'm aware, Sarah said with mock arrogance. Now get out there and make sure those pilots don't crash my planes. Jake saluted. Yes, ma'am. As he walked out into the Nevada sunshine, heading toward the flight line where the next generation of ghost riders waited, Jake thought about how much had changed. Sarah Chen was no longer just a name on a memorial plaque. She was here, alive in her own unique way, continuing to serve, continuing to fly. And on the wall of the main hangar, the memorial plaque had been changed. It no longer read, killed in action. Now it said, Major Sarah Chen, 1985-2020 present, lost but never forgotten, found but forever changed, a true patriot. Underneath, someone had added an unofficial addendum in small letters. She flew into legend and flew back out again. Jake smiled. That was exactly right. Sarah Chen had been underestimated, dismissed, and left for dead, but she'd survived. She'd come back, and now she was training the pilots who would shape the future of air combat. Not bad for a woman who'd been told she was too emotional, too weak, too small to fly fighters. High above Nellie's, in the clear desert sky, Jake could have sworn he saw a shimmer, like the ghost of an F-22 doing victory rolls in the sunlight. Sarah was flying again, and she always would be.